Good afternoon. I'm Yana Robinson and serve as PSSI's Managing Director and also head of our space security program. Welcome to our latest space security guest lecture that our institute organizes in collaboration with the Charles University. These lectures are part of an academic course entitled Space Security in the 21st Century, established by PSSI within the master's degree in international security studies at the Charles University Faculty of Social Sciences, which we co-sponsor. This afternoon, I'm delighted to introduce to you Dr. Ajay Lele, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi. Dr. Lele, a former Air Force officer, has published an impressive number of articles and publications on security, military, and geostrategic issues, including in the space domain. We're especially grateful that Dr. Lele is able to join us given the extremely challenging situation in India with COVID-19. Before we begin, I'll give floor to my colleague, Jakub Pražák, who will provide you with some logistic information and moderate the session's lecture Q&A session. Jakub, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jana. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please let me welcome you here for today's Space Security Guest Lecture. It is my pleasure to welcome here Dr. Lele, who will give his lecture on India's perspective on space security. Before we start, please let me give you brief instructions. We are in the Zoom webinar setting. That means you are all muted attendees. Nevertheless, you can ask the questions for the whole time during the lecture. And for that, please use questions and answer option that can be found at the bottom of your screen. In Zoom, if you scroll down in the middle of your screen, you can see three options: chat, raise hand, and questions and answers. To ask a question, please use questions and answer function that is on the right. Just click on the icon and you can type your questions there. Subsequently, I will mediate your questions to Dr. Lele after, or if suitable, during the lecture. I believe we will have enough time to answer as many questions as possible, so do not hesitate to ask at any time and we will answer them later. I would also like to mention that the lecture is being recorded. I hope it is all clear for now, and we may proceed to the lecture. Dr. Lele, if you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jenna, and all of you for giving me this opportunity to speak to the younger lot, to tell them more about India's space security. I intend to do a PowerPoint presentation, and I will just share my screen with you people. I hope the screen is visible now. So let me start my lecture. The topic given to me is about India and space security. I'm sure you all have a very broad understanding of the concept of a space security as such. So I'm not getting into the nitty-gritties of a space security. But I think what is most important over here is to talk of a space security first by developing an argument that why India is looking at a space security as an important issue in its national politics, or for more importantly, at a global level too. So for this purpose, what I've done is that I've formatted my lecture into various subparts. Essentially, since you do not belong to the Asian continent, I thought that it's prudent to give certain amount of a knowledge about the geography and history of the region. Then I will talk in a detail about India's space program, because I think that is more important to appreciate that why India has got concerns of a space security. Then I will talk of national security challenges also, because space security in isolation has got no meaning. Why India is trying to ensure that its assets in the space are secure because of a various national security challenges. So we will have a brief look at that. Then I will talk of India's military investments into space. What are the needs which were felt? What are the concerns? And is India getting into the realm of issues which are concerning more as a counter space capabilities too? Then I will focus on the soft options. These are essentially the United Nations based and other multilateral options, which are extremely important in today's days and time. And I think finally the solution is going to come up not from any hard option, but from soft options. And at the end of the talk, I will talk a bit about way forward. So just to develop a context, this map particularly tells you where India is situated. If you see India, it's a very interesting geography which India is surrounded by. If you see the part of this continent of India, India covers a huge landmass. It is supposed to be the seventh largest nation in the world. It is surrounded by smaller nations like Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh to its northeast, China to its north, Pakistan to its northwest, and Sri Lanka to southeast coast. I think these things will become more clear with this particular map over here. Today, there is a hurricane or what we call a cyclonic storm, which is very close to the western coast of India. So you can understand that India is a peninsular country. It has got Himalayan ridges at the north of it, extremely thick vegetation into the northeastern parts of India, and the western part, it is a desert region. So the challenges are huge. Why I'm emphasizing on these challenges? Because the topography and terrain of India essentially drives India to invest into technologies which will allow it to come over these obstacles of topography and terrain. Just to give you a small example, the temperatures in the western parts of India, the deserted regions, go to as high as plus 50 degrees Celsius. And almost around the same time, or slightly in a different season, the temperatures in the northern parts of the country, where Himalayan ranges are there, which is having the greatest mountain peaks like Kanchenjunga or Mount Everest, where the temperatures in the Kargil sector of India goes as low as minus 50 degrees Celsius. So you can see the temperature gradient itself in a hardly any sort of a distance, if one can say. If you look at a northwest part of India where the desert is there and northern part of India where you got Himalayan ranges. That is the basic challenge as far as India's topography and terrain is concerned. Again, I was making a mention that we have got a live situation right now where a very major cyclonic storm is approaching towards the northwestern parts of India. So these types of challenges do occur. And in order to ensure that you get over these challenges, to have certain amount of assistance from technology, India started investing into technology. As the lecture progresses further, we will talk into greater details about it. As far as history of India is concerned, I'm not getting into the details of it because it will almost take another 1 hour to discuss only of the history of India. But just broadly speaking, it is an ancient civilization. First traces of human culture were punctuated by invasions also. So India has got a history where from the western regions, from Afghanistan and adjoining regions, India has been always invaded by the people. So there have been certain amount of issues which are associated with that. So at the end of the day, in spite of going through all these sorts of invasions, subsequently the British came into India. It was a British colony almost for 200 years, and India got its independence in the year 1947. So the story of a growth of India, one can say, started after 1947. The basic challenge which India faces today is the challenge of a population. This graph essentially indicates to you that by the year 2010 or 2020, India is expected to overcome the challenges as far as population are there. But at the same time, if you see, the population of China is showing a dip, but at the same time, the population of India is showing a rise. I'm again emphasizing on a population because this is a very important factor as far as India's development process, or for that matter, the region's development process is concerned. And again, to cut the long story short, the technology takes a lead over here. You can see that as far as Asia is concerned, China constitutes as of today 31% of the population, while India is very close and India is expected to take over China. So you can see in this slide also, the population of China, population of India, population of Pakistan, population of Bangladesh, these are huge countries. They constitute of almost major part of the populations all over the world. Again, these countries are marred by various challenges of the weather systems, various challenges of the topography and terrain systems. And under those circumstances, if they have to overcome these challenges, look for a prosperous future where you will have good sanitation, good drinking waters, good situation for the people to live in, good amount of inputs where you can predict the natural disasters which are going to come up. So all these things demand certain amount of investments into technologies. So realizing that Asia, and particularly the southern part of Asia, has got geographical and weather related challenges, there has been an investment into science and technology in these years for many years. In fact, there are evidences that many centuries back itself, Arab states and states like India and China had doing certain amount of a major investments into technology, and certain amount of a major innovations could be seen. Like Chinese are credited for the development of a missiles and all that. So that's the way one has to really look at it. As far as India is concerned, historically there has been a major focus on mathematics and astronomy, and I think as far as India's focus on these two sciences are concerned, it has come it very handy for development of its own space program also. So post India got independence, India's journey into science and technology had begun. In this photograph, you can see the first Prime Minister of India standing along with Einstein, and the other lady on the left side to the Einstein is India's next Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So moral of the story is that immediately after independence, India realized that India needs to make investments into science and technology for the purposes of a progress. And that's why India started engaging with various scientific organizations globally. As far as India's space program is concerned, it's a very interesting story. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India, after India got independence, he made an appeal to the Indian scientists who actually were working or getting trained into various Western universities to get back to the country. And uh, in response to his appeal, there are many major scientists who are working either in Caltech or working at Oxford, Cambridge, and other major organizations where technological experimentation was going on. Many of them got back to the country and started making investments into the development of a technology trajectory of a country. And Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who has been credited as father of India's space program, was one of them. So this is the way all these developments into technology have started. At that point in time, if you really realize rocket technology, after the end of the Second World War, everybody realized that this is the key technology as far as armed forces are concerned. So this technology was not transferred to anybody. At the same time, there were certain amount of preconceived notions also by many, particularly into the Western world, that if we share this technology, even for the scientific experimentation, people may misuse that technology. And that's the reason there was a control on various technologies and sharing of those technologies. Obviously, if India had to make investments into space technology, investments into rocket technology was important. And India being a state which is just born, there were no major scientific labs or no major scientific experimentations which were happening into the universities that immediately India can started building up on that program. But India realized that India has got an advantage with its geography. India is a bit close to the equator, one can say. And at that point in time, particularly into early 1960s, there were a lot amount of experimentations which were happening into the Indian Ocean region and other regions where they wanted, particularly the countries like US, USSR, France, UK, they wanted a area or they wanted a site from where they can undertake their sounding rocket experiments. Basically, if you really ask me, the basics of space started with sounding rocket experiments, and all these countries were keen to undertake that type of experimentation. Indian Ocean region being a totally oceanic region, there was no opportunity to have any sort of a launch pad. But India was closer to the equator. So India realized, particularly the scientific community of India, which had got back from the US and other major countries, realized that yes, there is an opportunity that if we can offer them a landing site, at least certain amount of experimentation could start happening onto the Indian side, and we can collaborate with them and start learning more about this. Particularly have a look at this slide where you can see at the southernmost tip of India, we call that as a region in Indian state called Kerala. So there was a small area over there called Thumba. This was a very small fisherman's village. In fact, in this village, at that point in time, there was no even a permanent structure available where one can launch an office for a space organization. So the only permanent structure available in this fisherman village was a church. So in a sense, India's space program started from one small church because Thumba was recommended to the United Nations and to all other major countries as a launch site. These countries came forward, they invested into Thumba, they did certain amount of observations, and they realized, you can see the latitude of Thumba is around 8 degrees. That means around 7 to 8 degrees above the equator. And they found that this launch site is very useful. And along with Indian scientific community, the other scientists started making developments of this rocket launch site. Subsequently, Indian scientific community realized the strength of a space technologies, particularly during 1964 Tokyo Olympics. Today, we are in the midst whether the Tokyo Olympics for the year 2020 will happen or not because of the COVID crisis. But 1964 also there were Tokyo Olympics. The beauty of Tokyo Olympics was that satellite technology was used to broadcast all the sporting activities happening into this Olympics directly to the United States from Japan. So there was an idea which came to this mind of the scientific community in India that if we start making investments in satellite technologies and marry them with a television technology, one can transmit the signals to the smallest villages into the India, because the challenge of education in India was huge. India is a country which has got a lot of differences as far as development is concerned. You got cities which could be as swanky as New York or any other major cities in the world, but at the same time, you got all smaller towns and smaller villages where education levels, even the levels of literacy are very poor. So it was decided that if you make investments into space technologies and marry the space technologies for transferring the signal to the villages by using televisions, then definitely it could help you to make further progress. So that's the way India started making investments into space program. Here I have made some mentions that there was another scientist along with Dr. Sarabhai called Dr. Bhabha, who actually was working on atomic energy at that point in time, but again, a brilliant scientist. And both these scientists, in tandem with India's Prime Minister, then started making investments into science and technology. And particularly during initial stage, they realized that if a country has to make progress, country needs energy. And that's the reason the first investment was made into atomic energy, and the subsequent investment was made into the space technologies. As we have made a progress, India's sounding rocket program also started making some sort of a headway, because India realized and India had offered the Thumba launch site to the foreign countries. In a sense, one can say that was a very good pattern of a space diplomacy in early periods. I'm talking of almost 6 to 7 decades back. But that's the way the successful space diplomacy was done. Subsequently, US helped India in various sounding rocket programs. France also helped India. But when it came to launching a satellite for India, it was the Soviets who came forward. Again, there was a cost which was associated with it. Since Soviets helped India to launch a satellite, they had asked India to offer a certain amount of port facilities for their radar systems and other telemetry systems. So Aryabhatta was the first satellite which was launched. I'll come at it slightly later when we discuss the program in detail. So when we are talking of an India space program, one must first ask oneself a few questions. Why did India invest into a space? What are the processes of evolution for India's space program? Has the initial vision which was there put on by the scientific community has got fulfilled, or has any change in the agenda been made by India, and where the program stands today? I think there is always an argument which was given by many people that India is a third world country, a country which has got a lot amount of challenges as far as poverty is concerned, malnutrition is concerned, lack of education is concerned, even clean drinking water becomes an issue. So under these circumstances, why India should make investments into so-called glamorous technologies like space technology? The argument which was put forward by India's scientific community then, that India is making investments into space technologies only because of these reasons. Because India understands that if you want to get over the poverty, if you want to get over other challenges which the country is facing immediately after the independence, then definitely you need to make investments into technologies which will allow you to overcome these challenges. So the investments in space technology was happening just because India was poor, and just because India thought that investments into science and technology is the only good way for making investments, and that's the better way of making progress. So that's the way the investments into technologies were done. I've already, is it there now?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So the point which I was making, that Dr. Vikram Sarabhai was considered as a father figure of India's space program. He gave the vision of India's space program that this is a civilian program with a focus on application of space technology as a tool for socio-economic development. And trust you me, the same type of vision even continues today, because India has essentially used the space technology for the development of socio-economic purposes. As I was making mention earlier in the slides, that the challenges which India faces because of vagaries of weather and because of a very difficult topography and terrain. Hence, for the purposes of management of land resources, for the purposes of communication, for the purposes of Earth observations, for the purposes of navigation, there was a requirement to make investments into space technologies, and this is the way India has made those investments. Like I was making a mention that we started our investments into science and technology in atomic energy. So initially, that was the only scientific organization. So space program started as an offshoot of India's atomic energy program. So subsequently, in the year 1972, India's Space Research Organization came into a department of space, which was got established by that time. And the good part of India's Department of Space is that this department is not a small ministry, but this department directly comes under the Prime Minister of India. So one can realize that how important India's political leadership also realize that there is a need to make investments into space technologies. The aim of this program has been using space technologies for communications, meteorology, and natural resources management. The beginning was humble, as I was making a mention that in the year 1962, we took advantage of the topography of India, in a sense that being closer to the equator, we start allowing the other countries also to make use of India's launch facilities. That's the way we gained experience and started making further constructions. Here you can see even the parts of the rockets for launching a sounding rocket were carried on the cycles. The first satellite for a launch, because the site where the launch was taking place also was in a very distant part of the country. So there were no rail tracks, there were no proper tar roads also available. So even the first satellite was transported to the launch site by using a bullock cart. So the beginning was very humble, one can say. Subsequently, the first satellite for India was launched in the year 1975 with the help of the Soviet booster. That time, there was no rocket launching technology available with India, which will allow India to launch its own satellite. So the satellite was completely made in India. It was transported to the launch site of USSR, and they had helped India to launch that satellite. Subsequently, India developed a launch vehicle called SLV-3, that is Space Launch Vehicle 3, during the year 1980. That means 5 years after the first satellite was launched. During the year 1980, India was in a position to launch its own satellite by using its own launch vehicle from its own launch site. So in that sense, what we call in a space parlance, that India became a space-faring state in the year 1980s, because India had all the capabilities of developing a satellite on its own, launching the satellites on its own, and doing the telemetry and tracing of the satellites also on its own. India has got a reasonably developed launch vehicle program. We started with a launch vehicle called Space Launch Vehicle. Then we had a second vehicle called Augmented Launch Vehicle. Then a third vehicle, which is in use today. The first two vehicles were very old vehicles and they are no longer in use. But the third vehicle onwards, we are making use of those vehicles now also. The Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, one of the most successful vehicles of India. By using this vehicle, India has even successfully undertaken missions to Moon and Mars also. Then we have got a geostationary satellite launch vehicle. That is the satellites for launching 4-ton or heavier satellites into the geostationary orbit. I'm sure you must be knowing that an orbit which is around 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, where particularly you require to launch satellites for the purposes of communication and for the purposes of meteorology. So India has developed that vehicle also. Particularly the challenges for India was to launch a satellite into a geostationary orbit by developing a geostationary launch vehicle. The challenges over here were technological as well as there were a lot amount of geopolitical challenges too. Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle launches satellites into an orbit which is essentially where we can call as a satellites into the low Earth orbit. And it can carry the satellites only of the ton of 2-ton variety. So if you want to launch heavy satellites, you require a typical type of a satellite system, which has got an engine called cryogenic engine. That technology was not available with India. And in the year 1990-1991, India had requested, by the time the Cold War was over, and India had requested Russia to part that technology to India as an activity of a bilateral technology transfer. But at that time, United States of America came very heavily on Russia and told them that you just can't part this technology to India because India will try to use this technology for development of their own missile program. Technically speaking, this argument was not valid, but because of the geopolitical reasons, Boris Yeltsin, who was heading Russia at that time, he came under the pressure and the technology was not transferred to India. Subsequently, there were a lot amount of issues which occurred as far as development of this technology. Certain amount of sabotages happened when India started developing this technology on their own. So it took time for India to develop the cryogenic engine technology. And today with that technology, India is in a position to launch 4-ton or heavy satellites out into the space. Otherwise, for all these years, India was developing into a commercial launch vehicle, which has been made available called Ariane 5. And all India's communication and meteorological satellites have been used, launched by that vehicle. Otherwise, India's other satellites, India is in a position to launch on its own by using Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. There are various versions of this vehicle which are available. That's the reason a vehicle which can take satellites only into a low Earth orbit can even took a satellite as far as Mars and as far as Moon also, because of various versions of these satellites, because of various other techniques which were used. So one can say that innovation was the key when India went ahead with its Moon and Mars mission with very limited type of technology available with them. Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle also has helped India to launch satellites for the other countries too. So there is a commercial aspect associated with it. India has launched a lot amount of smaller satellites, particularly to the category of micro, mini and nano satellites. So India realized that there is a good amount of a market available. So now India has started developing another vehicle called Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. This vehicle, because of a COVID crisis, the test has not occurred. I'm sure in coming few months, this test of this vehicle will open. And subsequently, this vehicle will launch satellites which are say around 500 kg or lesser into the weight into a low Earth orbit. This is the way you can see the progressions made by India's various satellite launch vehicle. As far as GSLV is concerned, we have got various programs. We started with GSLV Mark II. Then we have successfully done launch satellites by using GSLV Mark III also. And more amount of investments into rocket developments also are taking place now. Because particularly the strength of a rocket depends on the type of an engine. So after India has successfully developed a cryogenic engine, there is a realization that if you really take want to launch satellites, say around 10 ton or something, you can't depend only on a cryogenic engine. You're required to make investments into what we call a semi-cryogenic engine also. And that development is presently underway. So first 2 decades, as far as India's space program was concerned, were more or less a learning phase. In those days, India did face certain amount of challenges also. Few of the missions did fail, and failures only teach you that what sort of a progression needs to be made. And Indian scientific community has learned from various failures too in this particular period of time. Subsequently, over a period of time, India has consolidated its space program. Like a poor country, India had very less financial resources available for making major investment into satellite technologies also, because country was developing. So in every part of the development, the money was getting spent. So space was not getting enough amount of a budget. So scientific community realized that if you want to launch a satellite for communications, you require an exclusive satellite. If you want a satellite for launching weather, then you require an exclusive satellite. Then a thought came that why can't we have a satellite which can do all these types of activities? All these years in the world, nobody had thought over this, that you can have one satellite which can even give you inputs on the weather. At the same time, it can be used for the communication too. So Indian scientific community came out with an idea, and they developed a program called INSAT, that is Indian Satellite Program, a program which was very unique in nature, which actually emerged out of a necessity, because it is always said that necessity is mother of various sorts of innovations, and that was the requirement, because India was not able to afford 2 to 3 satellites for 2 to 3 purposes. So they decided to develop a multi-purpose satellite only. Of course, these types of satellites have got their own limitations too, but now India has retired that program, and now India is developing various satellites for specific purposes. India did gain huge amount of a confidence because of the success of their polar satellite launch vehicle. Then they developed a very interesting technology for the remote sensing also. They developed a very major program called Indian Remote Sensing Program, or what we call IRS program. So a lot amount of satellites have been launched for the purposes of management of land resources, for the purposes of management of forestry, for the purposes of understanding weather patterns, and various other scientific purposes too. So that's the way India's space program have made a progress. And by the year 2005, there was a realization to the scientific community that now we have achieved what we wanted to achieve at a basic level. So after that, what was going to happen was to continue with the same program. A satellite is retiring, then replace that satellite with other satellite. Obviously, as the time progresses, you make developments into sensor technologies too. So there were a lot amount of advantages over there. But the scientific community wanted more amount of challenges. Otherwise, what happens is that you keep on doing a repetitive job. And that's the reason Indian scientific community decided to shift its focus. And it could be considered more not as a shift of focus, but as a natural progression. Because by that time, the space technology has made inroads into various aspects of humankind, into various aspects of man's life. Because there was a realization that much could be achieved if you invest into various departments of this technology per se. And that's the reason India started making investments into various other programs. Now India has got a program which is for Mars. India has got a program which is for Moon. India has got a program where India can launch smaller satellites in a big numbers. Like a couple of years back, ISRO had actually achieved a world record by launching around 105 satellites in one go in one launch. SpaceX has recently broken that record, but that's the way the technology development had happened. You had looked at a deep space. Whenever we are reaching to the heights of Moon and Mars, we call that arena as a deep space. So deep space experimentation also happened. At the same time, experimentation did happen into a low Earth orbit, making developments into sensor technologies so that you will get a better amount of imagery, a better quality of imagery, and at the same time, more number of satellites, how it could be launched, how you can make optimal utilization of your technological assets also. All these types of things did happen during last 1 or 2 decades or so. So India has started making a mark globally as far as these technologies are concerned. India has got one of the biggest programs of what we call Earth observation or remote sensing program in the world. The satellite resolution is even less than 30 centimeters now. That's the type of achievement which India's space program has done. India has launched its own navigational program too. Like what happens is that you got major programs like GPS. China has got one of the best programs in recent times called Compass or Baidu navigation system. These are global navigational programs where you require minimum 24 to 26 satellites working together at any given point in time, then only global navigation is possible. As far as India's requirements are concerned, they were getting fulfilled because of a GPS and other GLONASS type of a systems, a Russian system which was available. But as far as regional requirements are there was a certain amount of thinking that you need to have your own program also. You just can't over depend onto the systems like GPS and GLONASS. So India decided to have its own navigational programs, a regional navigational program. Usually these types of programs are not seen all over the world. You know that European Union is coming out with a program called Galileo. China has got a successful program. All these are global programs. Japan has got a regional program and India has got its own regional navigational program. And India has already launched all satellites which were required for that purpose. As far as space centers and units are concerned in India, you can see length and breadth of India, various agencies which are directly associated with ISRO or are the subparts of ISRO are working and various activities are happening right from training to the scientists also. India has got one major program where United Nations, which is under United Nations, and India trained scientists for various types of technological developments at a global level. As far as India's programs are concerned, I'm not getting into the details of all those things over here. We have got one of the best remote sensing programs. Then we have got a very good communication satellite programs also. We need to do something more into it because the requirements of a communication are both voice and audio. And as far as communications are required, there is a huge demands which is coming up from television industry, and India is not able to fulfill the demands of its own television industry because lesser number of transponders have been launched by India till date. India is making incremental progress into that region, but yes, I think something more could be done over here. As I was making a mention, we have got a good navigational program, a meteorological program, and there are a few other scientific programs also. India has launched a very beautiful satellite called AstroSat. This data and the quality of a data which has been picked up by this satellite is very unique, and many scientists all over the world are really working very hard on the available data being made available by India satellite like AstroSat. Then India is encouraging a lot of students also to make investments. Idea is to create the future generation of a space scientists. And a lot of student satellites and university satellites also have been launched by India. These are all micro satellites, mini satellites. Indian scientific community is helping the students in the universities. And almost to my mind, by this time, India has launched around 15 to 20, around 10 to 15 satellites for the students community and for universities. As far as deep space missions are concerned, India has successfully undertaken the first mission to moon in the year 2007-2008. This mission, along with NASA scientists, India has come to the conclusion about availability of water onto the surface of the moon. One of the first innovations, one of the first, one can say, indications which came out because of India's space probe over there. India's second mission to the moon was supposed to be a rover and a lander mission. That mission was partially successful. India's orbiter went over there, but at the last second, one can say, India's rover was not able to land correctly onto the surface of the moon and it did a crash landing. So India is going to repeat that mission as a Chandrayaan-3 mission. India has successfully done the Mars mission, India's Mars orbital mission, which took off way back into 2013-14 because it takes time to reach to the Mars of around 7 to 9 months. So we launched a mission in the year 2013 and the mission reached to the Martian orbit in the year 2014. The mission was supposed to last for 6 months, but interestingly, it has been a very successful mission. The power sources are still intact to an extent, And even today, certain amount of observations are available. So imagine from 2014, it was to last only for 6 months, but even by year 2021, we are still getting certain amount of signals from India's that space probe. Not that all signals are available, but certain sensors are still working in a perfect condition and we are getting good inputs. India has got plans of visiting Venus also, but it may take another decade's time or so for that purpose. India has been always said that India comes out with her space program, which is one of the most cheapest space programs. And that's the reason why India is getting attracted by other agencies also to launch their satellites. Here I have just done a relative comparison in this diagram, where you can see that NASA's program and India's program, the type of a difference into the investments which have been made. Of course, NASA's program is a very big program. It could be considered as comparing apples and oranges, but just for the sake of comparison, one can say that reaching to the Mars, if is an issue, then India has got a capacity to reach to the Mars very successfully, but at the same time in a very less amount of money. So cost benefit analysis wise, India's space agency has always been far ahead of rest of the world. As far as commercial aspects are concerned, India is making investments as far as commercial elements are there. In the year 1992 itself, ISRO has started its own subsection, which is going to look after the commercial interests of India's space program. So what are these commercial interests? India sells data. India is in a position to help other countries to develop their satellites. India is in a position to help other countries to develop their land, particularly their radar structures, their telemetry centers, basically whatever is required for management of satellites onto the surface of the Earth, the entire architecture India is able to produce it and give it to the customers. More importantly, India is becoming a very attractive destination for launching of small satellites. So till date, India has launched 328 satellites for various foreign customers. But yes, as we develop our small satellite launch vehicle, more amount of a business is expected to come. Right now also, India's order books are overflowing. India has got idea to undertake a human space flight. In the year 1984, one Indian Air Force officer called Rakesh Sharma went to the space and became the first Indian to visit to the outer space. He went along with Russian or in those days with a Soviet help. So he went with a Soviet help and was active there into the space for 7-8 days as the program was there, and subsequently got back. And now India is developing its own program where in an Indian rocket will go to the space by the year 2022. And now all it depends because of the COVID crisis. These timelines may shift here and there, but Indian astronauts, 4 Air Force officers were selected. They had gone for training to Russia and they have successfully completed their training. Now let's have a look how this program makes progress further, because if India succeeds into developing some sort of a COVID bubble, and India's scientific community can work inside that bubble and follow the timelines, but only time can tell. But maybe at the most, there could be a delay of 1 odd year as far as this program is concerned. If you see, ISRO has got a global footprint as far as its ground stations are concerned. Because with such a vast program where you are having satellites into all areas, right from navigation to communication to remote sensing, you got satellites like astrosats also, you require a lot amount of ground stations also to trace those satellites. So India has established its ground stations, as you see over here, into various parts of the world, right from Mauritius, Vietnam, in parts of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, in Russia, even in Norway. In Africa also, we have got our own ground station. If I have to look at a comparison of how countries are making investments as far as space is concerned, then one can see that a comparison based on this chart. The 2020 data is not fully available because of the undergoing COVID crisis. So I decided to look at 2019 data. It's a share of a GDP. So if you can see, United States spends around 0.25% of its GDP on space program, and countries like India spends around 0.06% as far as its space program is concerned. The Chinese figure is definitely doubtful because China has got one of the major programs. And as far as Chinese figure are concerned, you all understand that transparency is not much over there. Now, where this program stands today, I think this program, India has made modest investments, and India has got a vision that we want to use this program for socio-economic developments only. So ISRO's journey has been slow but steady. Future appears to be promising. Now, if you have got a program like this, and in today's world, there are chances that this program could have a certain amount of a security related challenges too. So now, having understood that this is what is there, and this is what needs to be guarded against any sort of external intervention, let's have a look at what are India's security challenges. India, after independence, has got unresolved border issues, mainly with countries like Pakistan and China. India has fought 4 wars with Pakistan and one with China. India has won all the wars with Pakistan, but had lost a war with China. The situation at both these borders, even today, is extremely unstable. China border luckily was dormant for last 4 to 5 decades, but just all of a sudden during last 5 to 7 years, again this border has become very active. So India has to be very cautious about it. Here, this slide gives you an indication that India fought the first war with Pakistan in the year 1947. Then the second war was fought in 65. The third war was 1971, which gave rise because Pakistan was divided into 2 countries, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So East Pakistan became an independent country called Bangladesh, and subsequently one more war was fought with Pakistan. As far as China is concerned, we have got major issues on the borders only, but these issues are still unresolved. These issues, if you really ask me, are not because of, say, India or China. These issues are part of the partition. When India was left, when Britishers left India, they had drawn certain borders based on their own perceptions, which has neither been now accepted either by India and China. And a lot amount of challenges are being faced, particularly into the northeastern border of India. The strategic realities, as far as India is concerned, India has got a very strong armed forces because of these types of challenges. And within a span of, say, 1950 to say a span of 7 decades, India has already fought 5 wars. So obviously, India has got a very major investments made into armed forces. We have got 1.4 million active personnels. We have got investments made into various types of technologies. India is a nuclear power at one end. At the same time, we contribute heavily with United Nations peacekeeping force also. As far as Indian armed forces are concerned, this slide just gives you an idea that how many people are employed by all the 3 services. As far as weaponry is concerned, the weaponry is there, almost a state-of-art weaponry. As far as Air Force is concerned, you got Rafales, you got Su-30s. We have got all major battle tanks which have been developed by India. India has successfully developed an intercontinental ballistic missile also. We got a program called Agni 5. Then we have got submarines. We have got warships where planes are also there on the types of the ships. The range of India's missiles is, idea is that you need to develop a missile technology which is a deterrence technology as far as your adversaries are concerned. And India has got 2 major adversaries, Pakistan and China, and India had no other option but to develop a missile which can address these 2 threats effectively, and India's ranges of these missiles are over here. So as far as India is concerned, India needs to remain prepared to fight a conventional war. Asymmetric war, that is basically the war where terrorist organizations are making a lot amount of inroads, and I'm sure most of you must be fully aware that a lot amount of terrorist attacks have happened and are happening on Indian soil. Essentially, Pakistan has realized that since they are not able to defeat India by fighting a war, they are using these types of asymmetric tactics and using terrorism in a very big way. At the same time, India being a nuclear weapon state, India needs to remain prepared, and India's both adversaries, China and Pakistan, are nuclear weapon states. Cyber warfare is becoming trend for the last couple of years, and space warfare, I'm sure all of you are fully aware that this is where the future of a war is expected to take place. So under these circumstances, one must realize that element of a space is important for all forms of warfare. All of us understand that Gulf War 1991 taught rest of the world that how beautifully the space technologies could be used for the purposes of warfare, particularly the technologies like meteorological satellites, communication technologies, navigational technologies, and remote sensing technologies. So space for militaries is divided into all these things. So today what has happened is that militaries are depending onto the space in a very big way. So that also brings in a factor of a vulnerability over here. All militaries are interested to do a full spectrum domination, and that is the reality. And that's why militaries are making investments into various new technologies, and space technology is one of them. Now one has to really understand that there is a difference between using a space technology for assistance of a military and using a space technology in a destructive form, which is actually not a no-go as far as this entire world is concerned. So nobody is looking at a weaponization of a space where one can go and blast somebody else's satellite, but people are looking at using space technologies which will help their army, navy, and air force in a very constructive fashion, because today's war are fought in a real-time basis. The commanders require, the troops on the ground also require inputs in a real time, and only space technologies can give them those types of things. So weapons in a space are being talked of. There are indications that the future may not be as good as the present stands, where space is essentially being used for helping the militaries. The weaponization could become a reality, and that is a basic challenge. As far as India is concerned, India has got not a very well articulated program, but India has made certain amount of investments into the space domain from military point of view. Let's just have a brief look at it. India has got two communication satellites which are meant for armed forces, one for Indian Navy, which was launched way back in year 2013, and one for Indian Air Force, which was launched 2 years back. Now India is planning to launch an exclusive communication satellite for Indian Army. Then we have got other satellites like hyperspectral imagery satellites, radar satellites, and all that. These are all what we call Earth observation satellites. Essentially, by using a military terminology, one can say that these are reconnaissance satellites. We have got few other communication satellites also, which are dual use satellites, which are helping Indian armed forces. As far as reconnaissance satellites or Earth observation satellites are concerned, India has made investments into technologies like radar technologies. India has got a good resolution also. One of the best resolutions which India satellite technology is offering is with a Cartosat series of satellites. Recently, we have launched a satellite which has got a resolution of around 30 centimeters or even lesser. So it allows India to see the objects onto the surface of the earth very clearly, and in any form of a warfare, these types of inputs are extremely important. This is type of a clarity of a imagery which is received from these satellites. As far as navigational requirements are concerned, you see the navigational requirements, if you depend on global navigational system, they offer you a degraded signal. So if armed forces are concerned, they require a very accurate signal. And that is one of the reasons why India made investments into a regional navigational satellite system, which helps its armed forces. So proposals for the future are there. I was making a mention that Indian Army could get a satellite, and then there could be few more satellites. Space for armed forces, the ground reality is that it would be very unprofessional to say that we will not invest into space for armed forces. Because if you're making investments into all modern day technologies for your armed forces, if you're making investments into technologies like fourth generation, fifth generation fighter aircrafts like Rafale or Su-30s or Mirages, then definitely all these things do not come without space technologies. So today, when you make investments into major military architecture or major military hardware, you need to have matching space technologies. And that is one of the reasons why India is using space for that purposes. Whatever India is using, India's requirements are huge. If you really look at it, India is not in a position to get imagery input 24/7. Actually, none of the countries in the world are reaching to that level because you require huge amount of investments for that purposes. Now let's look at the politics where space technology is making a very major role. As far as India, Pakistan, and China are concerned, all these states are nuclear weapon states. China has undertaken an ASAT test in the year 2007. India has also undertaken an ASAT test in the year 2019. All these three countries have got a very well-developed missile program. So technology is the key as far as these countries are concerned. But the major challenge in the space domain which India faces is from countries like China, which has made huge amount of investments into the space domain. China's space program, one can say, is one of the best space programs in recent times, which had made a very rapid progress in a very less amount of a time. I'm sure you must have read just 2 days back, their rover has landed very successfully onto the surface of the Mars. So they are doing brilliantly as far as space is concerned. But China has got their own challenges also, because of which they are looking at a space from a very militaristic point of view. One is that they understand that the Star War programs, which was conceptualized by Ronald Reagan in the year 1983, with his famous speech of Strategic Defense Initiative, is one of the most important programs which US has now started making it into a reality. Missile defense and all other systems are working very beautifully. And Gulf War, I've already made a mention to it. Then there was an accidental bombing of a Belgrade embassy of China, and few people got killed into this bombing. This bombing was done by NATO forces. NATO claimed that this was accidental bombing, but the bombing was done by a missile called JDAMs, that is a joint direct attack munition, and these munitions are GPS guided. So China understood that these are the technologies which are there with the Westerners. And tomorrow, if a conflict situation arises into Taiwan theater or Hong Kong or any other area where China is dominant, or even South China Sea region, China wanted not to allow particularly US to have a asymmetric advantage. And that's the reason China made huge investments into space programs, not from a civilian perspective, but also from a counter space program point of view also. So basically they wanted to tell the US that if you try to do something into Taiwan theater by using your satellite technologies, we can counter your satellite technologies by making major investments into it. And for that purpose, China has made very major investments, and they have not stopped at a ASAT test alone, and they have undertaken various other tests. Particularly these tests, luckily, are not debris generation tests, but they are giving enough amount of an indication that what sort of investments China is doing as far as development of their counter space capabilities are concerned. So under these circumstances, one must understand that even though China is remaining prepared to address the threat from the United States, India fully understands that this preparation could be easily used or modified for any sort of a conflict against India too. So even though India understands that China's major investments into counter space technologies may not be against to fight a war against India, but because of their perceptions of how to handle the threat from United States, but still they have got those technologies, and India has got no other option as far as addressing these types of a threat is concerned. And that is one of the reasons India also went ahead and did an anti-satellite test. Again, India did a test, not a debris generating test, but a test at a lower altitude. So almost 95 to 97% of our debris have already melted out by entering into the atmosphere. As far as China is concerned, they have made major investments into developing the structures also for their space forces. So their space forces are coming under strategic support force. India's space program against this global backdrop has to be looked at. And that is the key challenge over here as far as India's space policy is concerned. So India has started making investments into space technologies for strategic purposes too, because India fully understands that space is going to be extremely important to assist its militaries. So India's key focus will continue to remain to ensure that the space will be there to assist its militaries. But at the same time, India has got major amount of investments into the space. Like India has got approximately 28 28 now it could be considered as $30 billion also of space assets. And they are very critical for national security. And if somebody is challenging that jurisdiction, then at least you need to have a certain amount of a deterrence mechanism to tell the challenger that India should not be taken lightly. And that's the reason why India made investments into developing anti-satellite technology. As I was making a mention, US and China rivalry is a asymmetrical deterrence. But here India gets bogged down because of these things. US has a view, and it came out very clearly in the year 2001 Rumsfeld Commission report, that the next Pearl Harbor is going to be space. And they are fully convinced that the challenges for them are going to be China majorly and Russia as a second power. So US is making all those preparations. I'm sure you all must have read President Trump had established a separate vertical as far as space is concerned of a US Space Force for these reasons. So there are various space weapons which have been developed. We'll not get into the details of these space weapons over here. But if you go to the internet, you'll find a lot amount of mentions to these weapons. But these weapons are more in a theoretical realm now. Let's hope that they do not come into a practical realm. Like I was making a mention that because of all these challenges, US has come out with a separate military architecture and they have established their own space force. So under that backdrop, what India needs to think? Should India's strategy should be proactive or reactive? India is meant to spell that they require space for military requirements, but at the same time need to have certain amount of a policy to create a deterrence, particularly because China could be considered as an elephant in the room. So as far as India is concerned, nuclear deterrence could be a major deterrence along with Pakistan. But the way China has developed counter space technologies, India has got no option but to have a separate deterrence as far apart from a nuclear deterrence as far as addressing the Chinese threat over here. So now how the world is addressing the space security challenges. So as far as India is concerned, these are the space security challenges which India is facing. So we have got various agreements. We got an outer space treaty, we have got a rescue agreement, liability convention. All these are good agreements. Most of the countries have signed on it. Moon agreement, very few countries have signed on it, but broadly other agreements have been signed by various other countries. There are various UN bodies which are also operating over here. You got COPUS, you got Disarmament Committee also, then you got Prevention of Armed Forces Act also. There have been few recent initiatives also. China and Russia have come out with a draft treaty. I'm sure being a student of geopolitics, you all understand that as far as P5 countries are concerned, you got clear-cut two blocks. One block is other countries less than China and Russia. So the moment China, Russia suggests something, the other three countries oppose that. So that's also the thing which has been evident as far as your space draft treaty, which has been put forward by this. India is of the opinion that if they have put a treaty, because first treaty was very bad, first draft was very bad, they have put a second draft, it has also got a lot amount of limitations. But India is of the opinion that if you can at least discuss this draft under the United Nations, under the Paris Agreement, one can make certain amount of a progression forward. International Code of Conduct, a European idea, a very good idea which was put forward, because making a treaty mechanism which is acceptable to everybody in the world may not be a possibility, at least in near future. So European Union came out with the idea of a non-binding code of conduct. But again, this non-binding code of conduct, there were a good amount of debates and discussions did happen for many years, but it has not gone anywhere. And right now one can say that it is more of a dormant idea. As far as India's position is concerned, I have already explained you that India is of the opinion that we should discuss certain amount of a treaty mechanisms. India understands that it's very difficult to have a legal mechanism immediately as far as domain of a space is concerned, because the moment legality comes in, the moment somebody is going to challenge your space program, definitely there are a lot amount of perceptions and there will be a lot of naysayers over here. Particularly the United States is going to be the biggest naysayer, because the moment you say that weaponization of a space should be banned, their entire missile defense program goes for a 6. Because the basic idea of a missile defense is to engage an incoming threat into the space. So the moment you sign on a dotted treaty, your investments into missile defense has got no meaning. So it is unlikely that major countries like US, or for that matter, even one can say France or other countries, will like to have any sort of a rule-based mechanism which is legally binding as far as space is concerned. As far as India is viewing these ideas, India is okay with having interim measures like a code of conduct which is non-binding. But at the same time, India realizes that you need to have a binding mechanism. Otherwise, weaponization of a space could go here and there. So in a midterm, as a good form of a space security mechanism, confidence and transparency and confidence building mechanisms is the key. You have got governmental group of experts which are doing various activities. They have come out with various programs, and India has been part of a GGE, which has been there on cyber. India has not been part of GGE on space, but India has done a significant amount of investments into realizing and making people aware that these are important things and this is the way one should do it. So in closing, I will say that India has a typical space security challenges. Like I explained it to you that no country in the world has got their adversaries with them who they are sharing borders, and they are nuclear weapon states. They have got ASAT capabilities too. So the challenges for India as far as domain of a space is concerned are far different than the other countries. At the same time, India understands that just because those types of challenges are there, India can't raise the ante by getting into the zone of a development of a counter space technologies. So, but at the same time, India needs to have a minimal deterrence available. So India's ASAT could be looked from that perspective. But India's focus as far as development of a space is concerned will always remain on a socio-economic development tool. And I think that's where the key focus of India's scientific community and India's political leadership is also there. And today, what we are witnessing that a major cyclonic storm is approaching to the Indian coast, but we are getting early warnings almost for last 1 week about those things. And that has happened only because of a correct investments into space technologies. And these types of investments are going to continue future. I think here I will stop. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation that raised many interesting points, and I don't know where to start now, but luckily we have some questions, so I will move directly to them. First, we have a question whether will the briefing be made available to attendees, and this is the one I can answer actually, and the answer is yes. We will make video recording and the presentation available on our website after the lecture. Then we have a few comments here that are quite comprehensive, but I will try to paraphrase them to make them accessible to Dr. Lala. The question is, how is India encouraging space private investments, and what are the main challenges for India's private sector development? And is there a possibility of emergence of standalone self-sustaining private organizations such as SpaceX or Blue Origin?
Yeah. Can I answer this?
Yes, that's not my
I think this is a very interesting question. If you really look at India's space program, NASA space program, SpaceX program, and a private agency, then one has to understand that there is a huge amount of projects which have been given by NASA to SpaceX. SpaceX is been allowed by NASA to use their testing facilities. So there is a good amount of, one can say, backup which has been given by NASA to SpaceX for their own development. At the same time, I must say that Elon Musk and his team has done a very wonderful job. It is a very major company. If you really ask me, you just can't compare SpaceX with any other company. The company has become a very major company, as good as a program of any other state agency also. Today, SpaceX can reach to the International Space Station. Today, SpaceX can carry their astronauts to the International Space Station. India is not even in that zone now. India is yet to develop its own international own program for carrying humans into the space. Like I made a mention of a program called Gaganyaan. Maybe after 2 years, ISRO can reach to those heights. So forget about a private agency reaching to those heights. So India's space program and India's developments of a private agency need to look from point of view of what India offers. Because NASA offers something huge, and that's why SpaceX has become huge. But India, particularly ISRO, is not able to offer that type of programs. But at the same time, India's space launch vehicle, the ISRO's major space launch vehicle called PSLV, now India is transferring that technology to the private industry. Because if you really look at the full structure of ISRO, it is a research organization. Its job is not get into the domain of a space economics or space commerce. But unfortunately, since there is no other agency, it was getting into it. But now ISRO is transferring the technology to the private industry. And in coming years, there could be few agencies which could be major agencies as compared to the Indian standards. So one should not compare the SpaceX and India's industry, because India's industry is still in a very developing stage, and it may take many, many more years for it to reach to the heights of a SpaceX, because SpaceX is now even thinking of having their own visits to to Moon and Mars. So that company has definitely caught the imagination of the rest of the world. Indian companies, by Indian standards, are making investments, are making developments, and ISRO is getting into the hand-holding. ISRO has started offering their own testing capacities, their own launch capacities also to the private industry. So I think in coming decade or so, India's space industry should make major inroads into the global commerce.
Thank you. Maybe the next question is a bit connected to this. Is it planned to increase ISRO budget in the future, or is it planned to support new and more demanding missions from commercial activities for foreign customers?
I think it will go hand in hand. It has to happen simultaneously, because I was making a mention that India has started developing. In fact, the development of that rocket is almost complete, of a small satellite launch vehicle, because the foreign customers which are getting attracted towards India are into the zone of launching small satellites. So that is where ISRO has established its credentials. And when I was saying that our order books are overflowing, into that zone. If you really look at the India's customers, Amazon has been India's one of the customers. There are a lot of US agencies, a lot of Israeli agencies which have been India's customers. Now, why these agencies are India's customers, in spite of their own countries are having a very wonderful space programs, and they can also provide them opportunities to launch their satellites. But ISRO has developed a cost benefit analysis sort of a capacity to the rest of the world. So even for a company in the US, it becomes cheaper to launch a satellite from Indian soil than to launch a satellite from US soil. So from that perspective, one can say that India is a major attraction for rest of the world, including the major giants into the space domain also, into this particular arena. But as far as space is concerned, you got vast arenas. Tomorrow's space is not going to get restricted to the low Earth orbit. Tomorrow's space is going to have a satellite developments taking place. People are talking of a lunar station. So a lot amount of activities are happening. So India's private industry will look at, I think, this activity as a step one, and how they make investments and how they make developments on their own only will dictate the future.
Thank you. And we still have a time for the last question, and that is who or what are the main players or organizations responsible for managing India's national security space regime?
As far as India is concerned, ISRO is a total civilian agency. We started after China did an anti-satellite test in the 2007, established a very small cell in Indian Armed Forces called Space Cell. Now that cell has been developed further, and we got something which is known as the DSA, that is the Defense Space Agency, which is looking at the defense, or basically the military aspects of India's space program. But at the same time, one must say that ISRO remains a major agency, because even if a defense space agency is there, it has got no capacity to launch a satellites on its own. It has got no capacity to develop a satellites. So finally, ISRO becomes an agency on which all these agencies will depend. But as far as technicalities are concerned, you got a defense space agency which is working under India's integrated defense staff. So CDS is the person who is heading India's entire defense architecture today, and Defense Space Agency becomes a part of a CDS infrastructure.
Thank you very much for all your answers. Unfortunately, our time is up for today. I would like to thank everybody for attending today's lecture, and I also want to express my gratitude to Dr. Lele for his interesting and meaningful insights from the India's perspective. Thank you very much for being with us today, and also thank everybody for joining us. I wish you good luck, and also sending positive vibes to India, to say, because the situation is not really easy, and we really appreciate that you managed to join us today.
Thank you so much.